Hello everyone, my name is Paige Berrien. Let me just get this screen shared. Wait one second. Doesn't like me. Okay, amazing. Okay, that should be good. I hope so. So my name is Paige Berrien. I am giving the Snowboard Tech Seminar. I'm the VPP, so the Vice President of Promotions. So I handle the Instagram, stuff like that, responding to members. But also, I know a lot about snowboards, so I am the designated snowboard tech expert, I guess would be the word. So I unfortunately did not record the first time I gave this, so I have to record it again. So I'm just going to go over, it's a very long slideshow. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. My contact information is at the end. You can also find it just directly messaging the UWO Ski and Snowboard Instagram or sending a message to the Facebook group. So here's the tech seminar. So we're going to start with boards. So number one, board sizing, one of the most important things. So board sizing is based on four main things. So your weight, your height, your ability level, and your riding style. So it's very common to hear that snowboards should be measured between your chin and your nose. This is only conditionally true. So it's true for some people, but very much not true for others. So if your board happens to fall between your chin and your nose, awesome. But if not, it's not too big or too small if it was properly sized. So first we'll go into ability level. I put a little star next to it because anyone that's above an intermediate level snowboarder should not take into account your ability level when determining length. So if you were a brand new snowboarder, you might want to go for something shorter. However, as soon as you're intermediate, your ability level should not change the size of your board from intermediate to advanced. So yeah, 3 to 5 centimeters shorter if you are a beginner, just because longer boards are more difficult to control. So it adds a little bit more precision for beginners and not too much board to control, so it feels like the board isn't riding them. And then riding style. So other than like the influencing factors like flex the board, setting back stance, stuff like that, the rider style can influence the length of the board. If you're a freestyle rider, so meaning park and stuff like that, park jumps, certain kinds of half pipe, stuff like that. If you're really jibby and you like to whip the board around, 3 to 6 centimeters shorter than your we call it like the normal length. So you're if you were a intermediate all mountain rider, you get a set number that based on your weight and your height that this is what you should ride. But based on your riding style, if you're doing a lot of freestyle riding, 3 to 6 centimeters shorter than that. And then if you're only into free riding, so big mountain powder, stuff like that, 2 to 4 centimeters longer is typically what people like, just because longer boards are a little bit faster, a little bit stiffer, stuff like that. And then it again depends on your preference. Some people, even if they decide, hey, I'm a huge park rider, but I like riding, for me personally, like I'm a big park rider, I like riding boards right up to my nose. But it depends on the preference. So if you're comfortable riding something bigger or smaller and you're totally happy with it, then there's nothing we can really say to stop that. So, and the next couple slides are just charts based on, again, that normal length. So for intermediate all mountain rider. So for example, if I go to the women's table, I'm 5'2", and I'm around 120 pounds. If I go to 5'2" and then 120, I should be riding a 143. That's my normal board. However, I like riding, my board is 149. I ride it right up to my nose. I like it. I like long boards. So this is not a 100% perfect chart, but it's going to get you somewhere in the right range of where you want to start. We have the second table and then youth table as well. Next we have ideal widths. So this is something that is a bigger deal for people riding men's snowboards than it is for people riding women's snowboards. Because if you are someone riding a women's snowboard and you find your foot's too wide, you can just pop up into the men's section and ride one of their boards. However, for men, there's no other gender for them to switch to, so they actually need special wide boards. And choosing a board with the proper width is very important, so you have the right amount of toe/heel hang, which is basically how much your toe and heel go out from outside of the snowboard. If you can't get even, you want to try to get even toe hang on the front and the back, but if that can't be, it's better to have extra toe hang on the heel edge, just because it's a lot easier to get really low into a toe edge turn, but a heel edge turn is a lot harder to get really low into. So you're more likely to drag. the maximum underhang of a boot, so you can have too small of a foot on too wide of a board. It's not going to give you as much control. So the maximum underhang of a foot should only be about 30 millimeter difference, so about 3 centimeters. And then the maximum overhang of a boot should be about 3 centimeters as well over. So that's just one of the things that you can take into consideration. Depending on the make and the kind of brand, I guess, of the snowboard, certain brands start at different sizes. The general rule of thumb, if you are a men's size around 9, 10 or bigger, you're going to want to go for at least a mid-wide or a wide board. Also, depending on your age, if you were a 15-year-old and you have size 10 feet, if your feet are growing, you're definitely going to want to go for the wide board just because it's something that you will grow into. And then again, these are just kind of charts. So based on if you ride narrow, regular, mid-wide, or ride. Most women's boards, unless you get really specialized one, don't really have, unfortunately, wide sizing. Some of them have narrow. So if you're further very, very small, you might want a bigger board, but you can just usually pop up to the men's. And again, this is just a starting point. Many brands vary in their narrow to size wising. So it depends on what you're getting, what board you're riding, stuff like that. Okay, board profiles is next. So board profiles, there is 3 main types of, we'll call them bends of snowboard. So you have camber, rocker, and flat. Camber, I like to call it the W. That's not a thing that people say. That's something that one of the shop techs told me when I was very young, and I've always stuck with it. So I call it the W because the board, if you look at it, goes from the top down and then back up, just like a W. So that is the camber. It is fast, stable. You have spring-loaded ollies. It's also known as traditional camber, as this is kind of how all snowboards were made at one point, kind of the OG of the snowboard shapes. Next, we have the rocker. So I called it the U. Because it just makes a big U, kind of like a banana. So it's super playful, buttery, lots of float. It's known by many names, including reverse camber, anti-camber, continuous rocker, and a banana. And then flat, exactly as it sounds, we call it the line. Stable, jibby, good level of control, and a nice happy medium between the camber and the rocker, with the infinite amount of contact points underneath the foot. So if you look at the contact points in the camber, you'll notice the board will kind of hit the ground at 2 points, one kind of just past the front foot and just past the back foot. Rocker hits at 1 point right in the middle, and the flat hits completely, it's all flat. So there's kind of infinite amount of places that your board touches the snow. And again, here are just some profiles that you can compare, the flat, the camber, the rocker, and then we see these things that are kind of the hybrids, so the hybrid camber and the hybrid rocker. Most boards are a variation of flat, camber, and rocker. They do still make boards that are pure camber and pure rocker, but a lot more you'll see tons of hybrid cambers, tons of hybrid rockers. The backseat camber is a directional camber, so it means you can't really ride it switch because there's one foot that's meant to be the back, one foot that's meant to be the front. And we'll get more into that kind of asymmetrical shapes a bit later. Hybrid camber, personally, in my opinion, is my favorite kind of profile. I've only ridden hybrid camber boards since I was around 11. I've tried other boards, nothing really kind of hit the spot like the hybrid cambers did. And then hybrid rocker is kind of the exact opposite of the hybrid camber. So instead of having that camber between the feet and the rocker at the ends, you have rocker between the feet and then camber at the ends. And we'll get into more detail of what all these shapes means on the next slides. So camber, known as the W, the pros and cons. So this type of full camber profile is really good pop for ollies because you have that spring loaded, it's stuck like this, and as soon as you pop it up like this, it wants to snap back into its position. This improves the edge hold, adds the spring out of the turn, and it helps with stability and speed. Some of the cons, it can be easier for beginners to catch an edge in this sort of style. It's also more difficult in deep powder where you want to float, so you can't really lean back as easily with a cambered board as you could on a rocker to pull that nose up. And typically it's harder to butter and press. But again, that's depending on how stiff the board is. There are very soft cambered boards and there are very aggressive rockered boards. So it really depends on the exact board that you are looking at. Typically this is the most aggressive style of camber, and how aggressive the camber is depends on how exaggerated the camber is. So basically it means how high the arc in the W goes up. If it just goes up a little bit, it's going to be a less aggressive style of camber. But if it pops up a lot, then you're going to really, really feel that aggressive camber. Going into the next one, the rocker, the U, pros and cons. Reverse camber boards, so reverse camber or rocker boards were traditionally recommended for beginners because it makes turn initiation easier, and you're less likely to catch an edge because of that one contact point in the middle. These are still the case, but with hybrid profiles now, you can kind of get the best of both worlds. Continuous rocker profiles are very, very playful. They're great for butters, and they're super fun in powder. The cons for rocker boards is there's less pop. They feel kind of loose, which can only be a bad thing if you don't want a loose feeling board. This board doesn't hold the edges well. It's more difficult to stomp landings, especially if you're doing kind of big air kind of jumps. Provides a looser feel, which is a great thing for beginners because you're not as locked in aggressive, but also it may be difficult for beginners to control, especially if you're doing one footing off the lift. So it's a bit more looser and it can feel not as locked to the snow. Next we have a flat. So the line, this camber style gives a super stable ride without being too aggressive. So it's the perfect medium between the camber and the rocker. So it's a good option for beginners, and it makes it good for landing big air jumps, but also hitting jibs without being too hard to really pop. Not a spring-loaded ollie, but very, very easy to ollie up. The board that I think of when it comes to flat boards is the Capita Horoscope. It's not a fully flat profile. At the bottom there, I said flat profiles aren't very common, but flat to rocker is super common, which is exactly what the Capita Horoscope has. It's recommended as a great gym board. It's super soft, very good if you're a park rider and you like want to scrub around, getting out of jumps and rails and stuff. But also it's good as someone that just likes kind of a more in between, good for floating, good for carving kind of board. The rocker at the ends of those boards typically makes it less catchy, so it's easier to initiate a turn. And some of the cons of the flat, due to having so much contact to the ground, since it's not those two contact points along the edges like a camber or one like a rocker, this style will be a much slower ride. And yeah, for beginners also, it will be easier to catch an edge than a rocker board, but is more stable than a traditional rocker board. But again, easier to catch an edge. Some of these kinks have been ironed out with flat to rocker profiles. So it all depends on the exact profile of the board that you're looking at. Hybrid camber, you'll see in the picture. I don't know if my face is being recorded, but I keep moving it around. The hybrid camber, this is my favorite. So the rocker and the tip and tail make turn initiation really, really great, but also provide that little bit of float and powder. And the camber underfoot adds the stability, the pop, the speed, and the edge hold. So for me, I mean, it doesn't get better than that. How pronounced the camber and the rocker parts are going to depend on how much you're going to feel that under and how it's going to feel with the board. The variations lead to a very different feeling depending on how much camber and how much rocker, depending on it. So yeah, boards with longer rocker sections or a very little amount of camber are like often very good for beginners, just because beginners like that rocker, the playful, easy feeling. But the camber underfoot is still offering stability, which is super nice. Hybrid rocker profiles that are mostly camber, or where the beginners are camber, is very pronounced, aren't as suitable for beginners. But there's also directional hybrid camber boards. There's a ton. So if you have any questions on specific boards, it's really hard to go over it in this kind of way, just because it's a lot easier if you said, hey, Paige, I looked at 5 boards. Here's what I'm thinking of. What do you think's going to work? And I can walk you through all the things that you might like or not like about those boards. But since there's so much room for creativity in different board profiles and side cuts and all that fun stuff, so many boards perform differently. So these are just kind of the very basics. And then hybrid rocker. So the camber towards the tip and the tail produces the kind of pop you get from a camber, but the rocker beneath your feet is going to get that looser, more traditionally rocker feel. Better float and powder than a traditional camber, and it's easier, again, like the hybrid camber for turn initiation. It'll butter well and land well. It's a great all-around profile for the park and all mountain. A lot of people that ride park tend to like this profile. It's very popular in canoe boards. Skate Banana, I know, has this kind of profile, and quite a few other ones that they make. And usually they have edges that are serrated and good for, I think they're called steak knife edges. That's how they branded it. So they're really good at cutting in and holding that edge. And hybrid rockers are very quick edge to edge. So that turn initiation and really just going from edge to edge is very, very good and a lot better than just a traditional rocker board. And again, there's lots of variations, so directional, hybrid, rocker profiles, all that fun stuff, but it really depends on the kind of board that you're getting. Okay, next we have asymmetrical boards. Woo, very fun. So asymmetrical boards are not relatively new, but they're kind of really picking up lately. Asymmetrical snowboards, also known as asim boards, I'll be calling it asim boards just because it's easier, are boards that are basically not the same in some way. So you can have asymmetrical side cups, asim contact points, asim flex, asim cores, all this like fun stuff, but a lot of people are, why are you going to use the asim board? So for a lot of people, it's difficult to rail a tight turn on the heel edge. One of the reasons why we recommend if you're having too much overhang on your boot is to move it more on your heel edges, because most people can't really get down to their heel edge as hard as they can get on their toe edge. So if you're pulling all your weight onto your heel edge, you still can't get as low, which is really frustrating. So the asim boards have been trying to tackle this for a while. So it's basically meaning that on an asymmetrical board, one side is going to be your toe edge and one side is going to be your heel edge. The goal of the asim board is to realign that asymmetry in our bodies that makes it easier for you to turn, and it's an effort to make those heel side turns just as easy as our toe side turns. So in my opinion, I really like asim boards. I haven't had an asim board in a couple years, just because that's just not how the cookie crumbled. But in my experience, found improvements in the response. Just like I actually got this off the snowboardingprofiles.com. They did a really great job just explaining exactly what they do, why they do it, and why they're great boards to have. But asim boards are definitely going to be more popular coming up in the next few years. So a lot of companies are really getting into the asim wave, I guess. But so asim boards, a couple of things. That make a board asymmetrical. First is asim side cuts. So a snowboard side cut can be tweaked for asymmetry. So basically means the toe side cut is not the same as a heel side cut. So typically shorter and deeper, more pronounced heel side cut is gonna help with that maneuverability with the tighter heel side turns. And asymmetric side cuts improve your balance because it's kind of more aligned with our asymmetrical bodies. Our feet, our heels don't connect in the middle of our feet. They're kind of at the back. So this is one of the things that helps even out our natural asymmetry. And then another thing is asim cores or asim flex. That means going across the board laterally, there will be something in the core, sometimes carbon strips, different woods, stuff like that, is in the core makeup. And since toe side turns are more precise and tighter radius, you can make boards with a softer cores beneath the heels and stiffer cores beneath the toes to kind of, again, make up for that natural asymmetry that the body has. So the board's heel side turn is going to respond more like a toe side turn, which makes it a lot better to get that really low carve that we love getting on the heel side. Other asim stuff, a lot of fun stuff here. Again, this is only relevant if you have an asim board. If not, it's recommended for most asim boards to ride with a mirror duck stance. So whether that be -15 plus 15, which basically just means your feet are going to be out like this on the board. Some people don't like all the way duck, so maybe if you go like 9-9 or -9-9, stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure why this is. I think it's just basically normal board stuff. If you're doing switch stuff like that, I personally, my stance is always 12 on the back foot, 15 on the front foot. That's how I've ridden the asim boards that I have, and I didn't have any problem with it. So I don't think it has to be perfect, but that's just what's recommended. Riding switch. So a lot of things that people get confused with is an asim board versus a directional board. An asim board is not a directional board, so you can still ride switch, and in my opinion, better. So true twins are great for riding switch, but asim kind of makes it feel more natural. And yeah, with that mirror duck stance, it doesn't hurt either. Tip and tail shapes. A lot of asim boards, you'll notice they'll go up and they'll have some weird pointy stuff on the tip and the tail. I get asked this all the time at work, like, why does that look like that? It's not supposed to look like that. For the most part, it does nothing. It just looks cool. So a lot of, it's almost like a calling card that some people know. They see the board and they're like, oh, it's an asim board, because I can tell because there's some weird stuff going on the tip and the tail. It's more of an aesthetic thing, so I wouldn't worry about it. And sorry, high back adjustments. So people say all the time too, like, can I just jack up my high back and put that little I call it a cork. I don't think that's what it's called, but that's always what I call it. The cork in the bottom and make it lower so I can easily feel the toe side, heel side differences. Yes. However, increasing the forward lean is not for everyone. I'm a freestyle rider. I don't want a lot of forward lean if I'm in the park. I want to be able to feel relaxed, not like I'm always on my toes. So an increased risk of catching an edge and washing out. So like shifting that cork up and like increasing the binding forward lean also shifts the rider onto their toes. So it's kind of an unnatural balance if you're not really on your heels. So that's why, you know, high back adjustments, yes, it does the similar thing where it's going to make it easier to get on your heel side, but not without drawbacks. Whereas like ASIM really doesn't have those sort of drawbacks. Next, flex ratings. So for the most part, when we talk about flex ratings, we will be talking about longitudinal flex ratings. So that basically means from the tip to the tail, how much the board will flex as one piece of wood. That's the rating that you're going to see if you look in the back of the snowboard. So most boards are ranked on a 10 or 5-point system, where the higher the number, the stiffer the board. So if it's a 9 out of 10 stiffness, it means it's a very, very stiff board. Or if it is a 1 out of 5 stiffness, it's a not very stiff board. And there are a ton of factors that go into what kind of flex rating your ideal board would be. And there's a lot that goes into what makes a board so either flexy or not flexy, carbon strips, different types of wood, layering of wood, all that fun stuff. It's going to depend how stiff and where the stiffness is along the board. But deciding what kind of flex you like is based on your weight, your type of riding, how strong your legs are, how good you are at riding, your ability, stuff like that. Smaller, not as, I said, like muscularly. I don't think it's a word. It's definitely not a word. It's just what I'm going to go with. If you don't have as much muscles, you'll want to opt for a softer board. I do not have a lot of leg muscles. I like to think I do, but I don't. I like to ride boards that are usually in the 4 to 5. Maybe I'll push up to 6, but like not very often. Flex zone out of 10. Softer boards are a lot easier controlled, but for the most part, if you are traditionally and proportionally built, having a board that is the right size for you, you should be able to handle whatever the flex is. And a lot of the companies do the flexes differently, so you're not always going to be able to tell. What feels like a 5 flex for one company may feel like a 6 flex for a different company. So it really depends on what you're working with and what kind of stuff you're doing with your board. And then, yeah, there's just general flexes for rider types, rough ranges. Ask your shop tech, shoot me a message, any stuff like that about any particular flexes in particular profile boards, because it does, if you have a 5 flex on a camber board, it will feel different than a 5 flex on a rocker board. So we got park boards, if you're looking for, we call them jib noodles, so street boards, very jibby, stuff like that. 1 to 2 flex out of 10 is kind of your ideal range. Then we talk about, it's actually at the bottom, sorry, not directly under, but the park all around. So I said big air slope style. If you're doing a lot of, you know, big air jumps where you're coming off of stuff and you need to land and you need that kind of stability in the board, you're not going to want a board with a 2 flex. So yeah, anything between a 3 and a 6. That's kind of where I like to put myself, in between a 3 and a 6. I like 4 to 5. That's kind of like my sweet spot. Free ride big mountain is anything between a 6 and a 10. So those are getting to your kind of stiffer boards. And then all mountain boards, anything between a 4 to 7. So then between a 4 and a 7, it really comes down to what profile you have and what's your preference. Some people like stiffer boards, some people don't. And again, this is just talking about the longitudinal flex. There are also other kinds of flexes. They're not talked about as often. They're not as common to hear, but on top of longitudinal flex, there's also directional flex and torsional flex. So a directional flex is one of the things that can make a board asymmetrical. So it's just basically saying a board's flex can vary along its length. So it's usually stiffer in the tail and softer in the nose. So it's kind of like more snap and more control, but softer float and powder. So this is a directional flex. So boards designed to ride backwards as well as forwards, or like a twin flex board or a true twin. Just basically means it's the exact same in the nose and the tail, which is what you're going to get for most snowboards. So again, directional flex, anytime you see directional is not asim. Directional means it's not a board suited for riding switch. And then we have torsional flex. So torsional flex is very less commonly discussed and refers to the stiffness of a board from one side to the other if you're going across it torsionally. So like twisting it. So it does play a role. Stiffer boards will have a quicker transition from edge to edge and be better at holding carves, while softer boards are better suited to just kind of floating everyday stuff like that. So yeah, torsional flex, you can look up, most of the stats will be on there if you really look on a website, but they won't be on that back little panel that you'll see in a snowboard. But torsional flex usually goes hand in hand with a longitudinal flex. But some companies have done some fun stuff to make, you know, torsional flex super, super stiff and then flex along the board not as stiff. So it really depends on the kind of board that you are getting. Next we have taper boards. So this is another thing that makes a board directional. Again, directional, not asymmetrical. So a tapered board is a directional board. It basically just means the nose is fat. I mean, you could have the other way too, where the tail is fat on the nose. But normally, on I think every board I've ever seen, it's the nose is fatter than the tail. So it's a very common thing in powder boards. So you see the taper, so it goes big and then it gets smaller. These are not, again, super friendly to switch riders. So if you're a big park rider, I would not recommend a directional board unless it's your secondary POW board. Stances on directional boards that are tapered are usually set back, and they have more of a surfing POW party. If you think Capita Party Shark, that's not even a tapered board, but I'm thinking that's the energy that you get from it. What did they do? The powder hounds, is that what they're called? Those really big POW slashers. I think they're called POW slashers. Those big tapered, big nose, small tail, awesome for powder kind of boards. And then next, bases. This is like my favorite thing to talk about because I am a big base person. So there are two kinds of bases. There's either sintered or extruded. Extruded bases are created by superheating and melting polyethylene pellets, which basically means like you put all the pellets together, melt them up, put it in the board. And the result is a base that's one piece and it's not very porous. When it says not very porous, there is still pores in it, but it's just not as porous as sintered base, which means there's not as many holes. And sintered bases are also created using polyethylene pellets. However, instead of being melted, they're basically all the pellets are forced together under super high pressure. And this results in a porous base, so a lot more porous than an extruded base would see. So if you look at the picture on the side, you'll see the extruded base, there's really no gaps. It says no gaps. There is gaps, but there's just not as many as sintered base. And then sintered base is you'll see a whole bunch of little holes in between those circles. So there are pros and cons to both of these. We'll start with extruded bases. The pros for extruded bases are they're cheaper to make, so they're cheaper to buy, which is a really great thing. We like things that are cheap. They're also cheaper to repair. So if your extruded base gets damaged, it will be less costly to fix it or fix it yourself. You know, you can P-Tex it in pretty easily and it's not going to I mean, it's going to change how your board feels a little bit because if you took a chunk out of it, but it's not going to change it nearly as much as it would in the sintered base. And they're also easier to maintain. Since they're not as porous, they don't hold wax as well, which means they require less waxing. Since they don't hold wax, you can't shove all the wax you want into them. So you really don't have to wax them that often. Where some cons to extruded bases, they don't hold wax as well, so they're not non-porous, but they are less porous than their sintered cousins. So since they don't hold wax as well, you won't be able to wax them as often, which might be something you want for the next point, which is they're not as fast. Speed-wise, you cannot get, if you have two identical boards and one is a sintered base and one is a extruded base, the sintered base is always going to be faster. And then third con, they're less durable. There's some debate. It's actually like a pretty thing or extruded or sintered more durable. It's just based on how they're actually made. With that being said, since they are less durable and they may break, if they do break, it is cheaper to fix, which is kind of a pro. So, and then next we have sintered bases. So pros, they hold wax very well, and good waxing will help with prolonging the life of the base. So if you take good care of your sintered board, it is going to last you a very, very long time. And then speed, a very well-waxed sintered base will accelerate way quicker and glide much more easily on the kind of slight uphills, flat sections than their extruded cousins. Also faster through powder and slush, so anything that's really sticky, they're going to be way faster through. And then again, pros, more durable, somewhat debated, but some of the evidence seems to be in favor of the sintered bases. Cons, sintered base must be waxed regularly. Ideally, you wax it every time you ride, but obviously that is unrealistic for most people. So I'd say I get very nervous when I see people. They're like, I haven't waxed all season, and they have an extruded baseboard, but you are destroying your board. If you ride 4 full days, you should wax your board, and that's kind of the upper limit. You don't want to go much above that, or you're gonna kind of really damage the base of the snowboard, which is not fun. And then price. Most boards over $500, that's kind of like the general rule of thumb, will have a cinder base, so they are more expensive. But the bases do perform better, so you get what you pay for, and they are more difficult and expensive to repair if damage does occur. So it's less likely to occur, but if it does, it is more difficult and expensive to repair. Okay, next. Sorry, take a break. Okay, we got boots. Boot sizing. The most important things to look for when sizing a boot are the proper length, proper fit, any pressure points, and your heel lift. Snowboard boots, when you're fitting them, should not feel out of the box the same as your regular shoes. They should feel tighter. Your toes should be just touching the end without curling. So as soon as you if this is the end of the boot and these are your toes, as soon as it's just grazing, that's where you want it to be. This because boots will pack out. That's what we call it. They'll usually pack out about half a size while you're wearing them and form your foot over time. So if your toes are not at the end, it will not pack out that very last piece of boot. It's going to give your not an even fit. Almost every, I won't say almost every, but most new boots made these days have heat moldable liners that do form to your foot. You can choose to heat mold them or just wear them a whole bunch and they will mold the exact same way. Next, we're going to look at heel lift. Heel lift is kind of the number one problem that a lot of people have with boots. And heel lift is basically if you're up on your toes in your snowboard boots, how much your heel lifts out from the bottom. You want to keep this heel lift under 1 centimeter. So you can test this by standing with your boots firmly done up, just normally how you would do it if you were snowboarding. Stand in your snowboard stance, bend slightly at the knees just as you were riding, and lean up as if you're going to do a toe edge turn. So if your lift is under 1 centimeter, you're probably good. A lot of the times it's not, which is unfortunate. But heel lift solutions, you want to try a boot with an ankle harness. Sometimes dual boas. Salomon has a thing called straight jackets. You also try to find boots with J-bar inserts, which are little things that will smack around the inside to just lock your heel down. I know 32 does a thing where you can actually put those J-bars in the liner of the boots. And then, yeah, choose a boot that has a heat moldable liner that's able to really hold your foot in well. I'd say if heel lift is a big problem, I would definitely go with something that has a secondary boa, so not necessarily a boa for the whole system, but the one on the side that can really lock your heel down. Pressure points. Another important part of snowboard boots is make sure there aren't any pressure points. Usual places are your ankles, top of your foot. There are a lot of foot shapes. So it really depends. I'd never ever recommend buying snowboard boots online without trying them in store first. Go support your local shops if you can, but definitely go in there, try on some boots, take some time to really feel how they feel in your feet, because they are the number one most important part of your snowboard gear. So if you're going to invest in something, invest in very good boots, because if your boots do not fit or they feel bad, you are not going to have fun. So they're more important than having the best snowboard is having the best boots. And again, never go with a pair of boots just because your friend really likes them. Your foot could be different shapes from different companies. I know Salomon boots typically fit skinnier feet, which is great for me because I have very skinny feet. But if you have a wider foot and you're trying to shove on a certain Salomon boot, you might not have as fun of the time. And depending on where these pressure points are, many boots with heat moldable liners would be able to correct them. So you can kind of fan them out and pack out some areas before you actually get out on the hill. When you're packing out stuff for heat moldable liners, I always recommend try to do 1 or 2 days of riding after you buy them without heat molding them, just to really feel if there are pressure points. If they're not, you don't need to get them heat molded. They will mold to your feet eventually. But if there are pressure points, bring them back in. We say 1 or 2 days just because we don't want it to be too packed out, but also if your feet stink and you bring them into the shop, they will stink the entire shop. So 1 or 2 days max, please, and then bring it back in and you can pack them out and get them heat molded. Boot flex is the next thing. I don't know if you can see me moving this around, but I'm moving it. Choosing the flex for the snowboard boots depends, again, like a lot of things, your riding style, your ability level, and compatibility with your snowboarding bindings, and then also personal preference. So I have a just a table on the left-hand side there. So most park riders like softer boots, all mountain kind of medium, freeride backcountry medium to stiff, and racing and big carving super stiff. Again, it's on usually on sometimes on a 5-point scale, usually on a 10-point scale. Just the same as your boards, you're typically going to want to line up your board to your boots. So if your boots have a 5 flex, you want to try to if your board is a 5 flex, you want to try to get boots at a 5 flex. It doesn't have to be perfectly 5, but if it's a 5, that means it's a mid flex, so somewhere in the same mid flex. You don't want to be riding a board that is a 9 out of 10 stiffness with boots that are park boots that are 1 out of 10. So just kind of making them compatible in that way. And then ability level, beginners usually like softer boots just because they're easier to stand in and without getting your feet sore if you're really doing a lot of work on your feet, especially when you're a beginner and you don't know which muscles to use yet. And then again, personal preference. I like softer boots, but when I used to do racing and stuff, I had different boots that I wore. Even when I did half pipe, I had more responsive boots. But if I'm just riding around, having fun, doing some park, I like to have very, very soft boots. And then lacing systems. This is the one thing that really kind of differentiates the different kinds of snowboard boots. At least this is the big thing for me. There are 3 main kinds of lacing systems. So there's traditional lace, BOA, and speed lace, and we'll go through them. So traditional lace boots, pros, you can control how loose or how tight they are. And that looseness or tightness depends on the section of the boot. They're less prone to creating pressure points, and they tend to be cheaper. And if laces break, they're very easy and cheap to replace. But cons, it can be hard to get them really tight, especially if you don't have a lot of grip strength. Like I do not have grip strength, so I don't like lace boots. Typically, you need to remove your gloves to tighten them, and the laces can loosen up over the day. However, I said the hockey skate technique will fix this, so that basically just means you put hockey laces, those waxed laces, in instead of your normal snowboard boot laces, and they will keep your boot totally firm for the day. That's kind of an insider's trick. But next, BOA. I have BOA boots. I love BOA boots. I'm never going to go to other BOA boots, the boots that aren't BOA, so pros are really easy to get them tight. It's just you twist the knob, so it's easy to do when your fingers are cold because you can keep on your gloves. You're less likely to experience too much heel lift, especially if there's that secondary BOA on the side. If you can see like here, that is going to lock your ankle down, and they're very quick to do up or loosen, tighten. I like when my feet are tired and it's been a long day of riding, if I'm just taking a break on the chair, I'll loosen my boots for the 5-ish minute ride up the chair, and then just super quick crank them up and then be good to go. Cons, they're more likely to cause pressure points, especially if you have high arches and, kind of cheaper models. And again, double BOAs are less prone to pressure points because you can do the top and lower section separately. If your BOA roots break, it is critical and you have to end your day on the mountain. It's not like kind of laces where you can just get a lace and get it together, but your boots aren't going to be done up, so you have to end your day. Cons, also more expensive. BOAs are always going to be more expensive until there's something new and fancier that comes along. They're the most high-end boots that you can get right now. And some heavier people tend to feel not as secure. I have a lot of friends that ride park that just despise BOA boots because they just don't feel like they're in them. But they're all, men that are a lot taller and a lot bigger than I am. So a lot of heavier men don't really like the BOA as much. But again, it depends on personal preference. And then third, speed lace. So this is kind of like the precursor to the BOA. The pros are super quick to do up, lightweight. You can tighten with your gloves on. Again, and a lot of them have dual systems, so upper and lower, just like the dual BOAs. And they're cheaper than BOA systems. So they're more expensive typically than your normal lace systems, but cheaper than BOA. Cons, they can be difficult to get really tight, especially if you don't have very good grip strength. I find when I'm at work a lot of the time, especially the boots that aren't broken in yet, it is a really hard time. Really only you can do them up. Just based on the angle, you can't get your friends or parents to pull it up very hard. So when I'm at work trying to tighten them on someone's feet, it looks very ridiculous because I'm struggling to pull it up because it's at the wrong angle. You'll notice the little side thing in this, I don't know if you can see my mouse, hopefully you can, but on the Burton boot, the side thing where you tuck it in, you pull it up and then you pull it back to lock it. So since you were pulling it up in a certain way, you can't do that very easily from a position that's not when you're the one wearing it on your feet. So that makes it a little bit difficult, but They can loosen over the day, and they may require regular retightening depending on how good those notches are. And they can be tough to figure out how they work at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's usually fine. And then cons are more expensive than lace systems, so they're kind of right in the middle. This is the pre-BOA era, a lot quicker to do up, but not as quick and efficient as the BOA. And then other boot tech things to consider. These are just kind of things that may affect the price of a boot. Sometimes you walk into a store and you see two boots, one's $200, one's $300, and it's like, what's the difference? Materials the outsoles are made out of. So different materials and rubber are used to enhance traction on the bottom of the boots. So I know high-end boots, I know Ride does, they do Michelin strength, Michelin, I guess, like rubber around the outside, and traction, different kinds of rubber, different kinds of outsoles that it's going to make it easier to walk up. And then also heat moldable liners. Almost all boots made now have heat moldable liners. It just depends on the customizability, I think it's a word, and the quality of liners. A lot of companies use Intuition, which is like a brand liners. Some manufacture their own. And yeah, I said this earlier, if you're molding boots, ride them for a day or two and then bring them back in. But there's just some of the things that may make a boot more expensive. If you look at boots, usually they have a little thing in the top or a tag that's going to tell you all of the tech specs of the boot, see what you're getting out of it. But a lot of the words are very confusing. A lot of companies use their own kind of jargon and their own patented, oh, it's called this, like, but so it's hard to decipher, but those are the kind of main things that you will get in a higher end boot: more traction, better liner, stuff like that. Bindings, last but not least. Need some water. All right, bindings. So binding sizing, they typically come, bindings aren't in sizes like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Typically small, medium, large, or small/medium, medium/large, large, extra large, usually 3 sizes across the board. There's no industry norm for which boot size fits which bindings. So a medium-sized binding in one brand might fit a size 10, but in another brand, you might need a large. So I had this chart that was graciously pulled off of, I think it was snowboardprofiles.com. The different boot, so according to your boot size, where you're going to fit in brands depending on all of their, I guess, like their binding sizes. So for example, if I was a size 7 and I wanted to get some Burton bindings, I would be a small. But if I was a 7 and I wanted Rome bindings, or sorry, I found one that's not small, K2 bindings, then I would need a medium. So again, if you go into a shop, someone will set you up like this. Bindings are not as important to get perfect as your boots, but still obviously very, very important that you're not having binding way too small or way too big for your foot. And then again, from their charts, women's binding sizes. And then mounting systems. So these are the 4 different main, I guess, mounting systems. It's really down to 2 at this point, but I thought I'd just go over all 4 just in case you have older boards, stuff like that. So the first one is the 4x4 mounting system. So this is now very uncommon. It was on older boards and cheaper boards, but this is almost completely phased out, but you'll still see them every once in a while. Most boards come with the 2x4, which we'll see next, or the channel. So cheaper boards, youth boards, sometimes will come with the 4x4. It's called that just because there's 4 centimeters in between each of the inserts, even though it's a 3x2 row, it's called a 4x4. These use universal plates, 4 screws for mounting, normal stuff. The 2x4 mounting system is the most common. Every board that is not a Burton board, I don't say every board, but most 95+% of boards that is not a Burton board will be made with this pattern. Super similar to the 4x4 system. The holes on the rows are only 2 centimeters apart. So it still, again, works with the universal base plate with 4 screws, but you have more stance options with more holes closer together. So usually 6 holes per row, 2 rows of 6 holes. Next, there's the 3D, the 3-hole, whatever you want to call it, by Burton. So Burton did this thing where they're being kind of annoying, and I mean, it's a smart business move, but they basically have been making mounting systems that are different than their competitors, so you have to buy Burton bindings to go with it. Other companies have kind of stepped up and made ways around this. You can now adapt a lot of bindings to go on Burton boards, but this is what they were doing originally. All new Burton snowboards use the channel system. So if you buy an old Burton board, it still may have the 3D pattern. I know in our shop at least, I think I want to say 2 seasons ago, we still have kids boards that have this 3D pattern. This uses 3 screws to mount the bindings and it's not a universal base plate, and I don't think any, I don't say any, but I have a chart for the next that says which bindings can adapt to this kind of system. But for the most part, you're gonna want to get triangular 3D mounts for this board that are Burton bindings. And then next, the other big super common one is Burton. So all new Burton snowboards use this. You've seen it. It's also known as the track or the rail or EST, whatever you want to call it. And it basically just is a big line that you can mount your bindings in a whole bunch of different places. You're not limited to the kind of 6x2 rows. Basically, the idea is this, that there's no dead zone between your feet. Not no dead zone, but you're limiting the dead zone. So if you have 2 big base plates on a snowboard and you go to flex the snowboard, it's going to flex until you hit that base plate, and then it's going to stop flexing all of a sudden. So those are the idea is that you want to limit that amount of dead zone so your board is less likely to snap and feel more natural flow. With that being said, I haven't had a big of a problem with it. No, nothing bad has happened so far. I've ridden boards that have Burton channels. And I haven't had a problem with them, but I don't love them. I like my normal 4-screw bindings. So the idea, though, is you can have virtually any stance you want with the system. You can move bindings up and down, and your bindings are going to flex well because there's no dead zone. And Burton EST bindings are designed to work with the channel system, but other bindings can work if they have the correct base disc. So based on this chart right here, it's going to say if these bindings will work on different. So Burton EST bindings do not work on the 2x4 or 4x4. They only work on Burton channel bindings. However, Burton makes step-ons, for example, that will work across the entire board. And then if you just check what board you're getting, check what mounting system you have, and you can check that way. If you have any questions, feel free to message me, let me know, and I'd be happy to help. But yeah, this is that chart. And then this is just a whole bunch of, if you look at the chart with the little stars, what's it saying? Some of them, for example, like Ride's new bindings, they have a whole line that are all compatible with the channel. And so that's their new 2021 line, but some of their old bindings are not originally compatible with the channel, but you can buy little special base plates from Ride that will make them compatible. So it depends. And then now binding types. There are other kinds of binding types. I just thought I'd kind of highlight the main 3 that you see. So we have strap-ins, speed entry, and step-ins. Visually, you can see the difference between them, but I will go on to the next slide and explain them. So strap-in bindings. The pros are completely independent of adjustment for the toe and the heel pressure. These are easy to strap in when sitting down, which may have to be done if you're strapping in a super steep slope, or you're stuck somewhere, things like that. And this is easily adjusted for preferred tightness. All the bindings now, I don't say all, but 90% of the bindings nowadays, all the heel straps, ankle straps are all completely adjustable, that you can just do it toolless on a hill, which is really nice. The cons are it's slower to strap in than with speed entry or click-ins, which if you're with very impatient skiers may not be the best thing. I find that they don't take that long to strap in. It takes me 10 seconds to strap in my foot. I always use strap-in bindings. I have no intention of going to other bindings, but these are just the ones I like. And you have to adjust the straps each time you strap in, which means you might not feel as tight every single time, but I always just tighten it so it feels good, and nothing bad has happened yet. So speed entry bindings. These are really common for flux or canoe. Pros are it's quick and easy to strap in. This little thing at the back that you see on the back of the high back, you just pop down and then you shove your foot in and pop it back up. There are also variations. I know Canoe does a lot that are not a cage. I call it a cage in the front, but it's actually individual toe cap and then heel strap. But they're still the speed entry bindings. You can strap in easily without sitting in the snow. So if you just get off the chair, pop it up, and your setup will always feel the same because you're walking in the same way. The cons are, especially if you have a cage, the adjustment of pressure on the toe and ankle is not completely independent. Can be very tricky to strap in sitting down, or if you're in an abundance of powder, it's hard to get your foot in like that. It takes a little more to learn how to set up and get used to putting it in initially, and you can't get as tight of a fit without being super hard to put on, because there's a little cable that runs around. And if you tighten that cable too much, it's going to be really hard to get your foot in, but if you don't tighten it enough, you're not going to feel as locked in. Most people never go to these kind of bindings, but some people are diehard. I know my dad rode these bindings for a while, and he loves the easy strap in, 1 foot in. He used to actually have a strapped one on the front because he liked how it felt, and then a speed entry one on the back because he liked how quick it was. So depending on what you like, most people typically go for, there's a lot more selection in the normal strapped bindings, but some people are diehard with speed entry bindings, and they're a really good option for someone who wants to have an easier, kind of consistent, easy way to click in. And then last we have step-in bindings. So these have been really big this last year. So I know K2's doing one, Burton does one. I have a Burton one here. The pros are they're quick and easy to get into. You can strap in without sitting in the snow. A lot of people strap in without even putting their foot down. You just ride off the chair and shove your foot in. The locked heel in the back gives you a maybe even more responsive feel than in a normal binding, just because your foot is connected to the boot. The cons, as of now, the micro adjustability is lacking. You can't get a certain feel. Sometimes people like a really, really tight toe cap, but a looser heel cap, stuff like that. Also expensive as hell right now, unfortunately, and you also need special boots for the binding, so you need to get, so for example, the Burton ones, I call them clickers. I don't know if that's what they're called, but I call them clickers. The Burton clicker ones, there's a little knob on the toe that actually locks into that part that's black at the ends, and you need that special Burton boot to work with those. And for now, there's a limited style selection just because they are so new. And then I also like to point out that step-ins are not the same as step-ons. Step-ons were super big kind of like 15, 20 years ago when they were trying to figure this out. My mom actually had step-ons. She loved them, but they're very buggy. They had a lot of problems. Overall, suspicious. So it didn't really catch on. You had to put this big metal thing in your boot. There are some also step-in bindings that just kind of latch over the front that you don't need certain boots for. But I personally find them a little bit suspicious. Even the step-in ones, I know that you're locked in. I've seen Mark Morris throw his triple corks in them, but I don't know. Something doesn't sit right with me, so I like my strap-in bindings. They're a cheaper way to go for the most part, and they're reliable. Other things to consider when choosing bindings. So your flex, just like your boots, you want bindings to match your boots and your board. Don't get super stiff bindings if you have a super soft board. It doesn't have to be perfect, but within the kind of soft, medium, or stiff range, it's going to work great. Shock absorption, so depending on your style of riding, this can be really important or not important. You may not need the most shock absorbing bindings if you're not really taking big jumps and taking hard impacts, but if that's something you're doing, that's definitely something you're going to want to consider. Other tech stuff that's going to make bindings more desirable, stuff you may see online, it's like canted footbeds. Canted footbed is basically inside the binding footbed, it's just going to be a little bit on an angle, so your foot feels more natural standing in it, just so it lines up with your knees, so it doesn't hurt your knees as much. Union does this thing called mini discs, which are same idea as Burton's channel. It's trying to limit that dead zone. So instead of a universal disc that's about this big, it's a mini disc that's about this big that watches on. Some people don't feel as secure, they don't like it as much, but I haven't had any problem with the time that I've used mini discs. But again, it does the same thing as the Burton channel, same idea. Some people have mini discs on the Burton channel. They say they don't like that because it's not as secure. Some people can't tell a difference, so it's one of those things you're going to have to really play with, and depending on your preference. Other things like on-mount adjustability may also come into consideration when choosing a binding, so that's something you want to do, and you're just kind of wondering stuff like that. There's so many different things when it comes to bindings, boards, and boots that if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help you choose between different gear. But yeah, so I guess questions. There's no set of rules for buying gear. Each person wants different things or are unique. Don't buy a board just because your friend said it's the best board. I always recommend going to a shop, support local shops, stay away from the checks in the mart and stuff like that. if you need any help, feel free to reach out. Ski and Snowboard Club, our Instagram is UWO Ski and Snowboard. The Facebook chat that we have, our email's in there. Or you can contact me directly at my Instagram. It's just Paige Berrigan, or my number. But yeah, I'm glad I got to record this whole thing again. But yeah, any questions, feel free to reach out. Have a good day, everyone. Oh, that's embarrassing. I don't know how to...